It's time once again for Talking Bible with the Brandons, the only podcast that proves a Tennessee fan and an Alabama fan can get along. Here's your host, Pastors Brandon Pugh and Brandon Carter.
Good morning, Bethel. And here we are, Brandon. There were three, and now there's just two here.
That's right.
Moose, unfortunately, has sadly had to depart. Greener pastures lie ahead, I suppose. But Brandon and I are left here to attend to the homestead.
Yes.
Yeah, the good old homestead of Bethel Baptist Church. And
That's right.
no, he's not leaving the church. He just had to go to work. So it's,
Some people have to work for a living.
They really do. So, and we salute you for that. And, this is work too, man.
Here it's like every
I know
day.
we make
Every
it look
day is a holiday.
effortless,
Every day is a holiday.
Every day's a holiday. Is that a song or?
I don't know. That's what they used to say in the Army. Like,
Man, you were never even in the Army.
I was too.
Man, just because you went to West Point for a semester?
It was over a year.
Oh, okay, 2 semesters.
I had 2
Doesn't
summers.
mean
I
you
had
were in
basic
the
training.
Army.
I had basic training and another summer of training.
Please.
That's right.
Wannabe over here.
And
I was in the Army.
And, that's the way those guys always say.
You were never
Every
even
day is
granted
a
a
holiday.
commission. Well, maybe whenever you're at West Point, it's a holiday. But the Army, I don't remember saying anything
Yeah.
like that. I was a working man, soldier. That's right. You're welcome for your freedom that you just celebrated a couple weeks ago. Yeah. There it is.
Snap it off.
I think we need to snap this discussion off and move on into Ezra. So if you guys remember yesterday, we jumped into a new book, Ezra, and Ezra is really about the people of God, the nation of Israel, moving back into Israel. They're repopulating it. King Darius of the Persians, it's King Darius, right? I always get them mixed
Cyrus
up.
is the
That's
one.
right, King Cyrus, that one. He gave them the A-OK to go back on in there, and he even didn't give them permission to leave captivity there in Babylon. Or I guess would it be considered Persia at that time since they had been conquered by the Persians?
I guess so.
Yeah, whatever. But he not only gives them permission, gives them his blessing, but he also provides them with all of the things that have been sacked from the temple previously and funding to build the new temple.
And offers them protection as they travel.
Man, it's almost like the Lord's Spirit had moved him, or maybe didn't it? Isn't that what we said right there?
The very first verse of the whole book says that. That's right. But, of course, what's going to happen? They start to rebuild
and you're going to have
the temple.
Yep. You're going to have some godless pagans that try to stop them.
That sounded so terrible, the way you said that.
Well, that's what they are.
Like, do you love people who need Jesus?
I try.
The way I heard you just say that did not sound like a whole lot of love there.
There wasn't even a hint of Well, that's what they were.
They were pagans. They don't want to see the temple rebuilt, and so they opposed.
And they interfered, and they tattled. They tattled on them.
Yeah, because the king changes hands. The kingship changes hands, and so they're like, hey, we will try to stop this, and maybe the new king won't feel the same way. And guess what? He doesn't.
They succeeded.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we find ourselves here. But that's how long did that lasted a good while.
Well, yeah. So they start to rebuild the temple, and I think they work on it for quite some time, and then that's chapter 3, and then the interruption comes in chapter 4. And it stays dormant for several years, which is why.
10 years.
Yeah, so why you have prophets. Some of the other prophets that you'll read, like Haggai and Obadiah, I think those 2 Old Testament minor prophets, those are prophetic words to the people, trying to stir them back up in order to start building the temple again, to kind of get them motivated to do it. So yeah. So Ezra is okay. So opposition in chapter 4 arises, and they try to stop them.
Was that what you did your hair journal over?
Yeah, like verses 1 and 2 of chapter 4. So when the
like
adversary
opposition to you in the church, and this is kind of how you view it?
could be.
Yeah.
It could be with anybody. And here's why. So it says, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' houses and said to them, let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. Aha!
Yeah, but who else have you been serving and worshiping?
Here's the thing. So what they're doing, and this is, I thought, was insightful. If you do the Lord's work and you're on mission for the Lord, you're going to get opposition. Somebody is going to try to push back. It'll be your flesh. It could be just the temptations of the world. It may not be the government. It could be the government. It could be a particular person, but there will be some kind of something in some way to oppose you. What's interesting here is that the opposition is kind of clothed. They're wolves in sheep's clothing.
Those are the worst kinds of opposition as well.
Yeah, so I put down here that sometimes these verses show that doing God's work will arouse the darkness. It requires God's strength and endurance, but it also requires insight and discernment. These verses show that opposition can dress itself to look like the real thing. It can claim to be on the same side. It can say it has the same purpose or mission, but it's an enemy. And it can do that wittingly or unwittingly. And I think of a lot of bad variations of Christianity, especially liberal Christianity.
Sure.
They will use the same words.
Got the veneer on it.
They will claim to be on the same mission as we are, but they reject the basic core beliefs that we hold, as well as basic morality that we hold, and basic views of life and death. So they can use the same words, say they're on the same mission, but it's not the same thing. It's not the only example of that, but it's one example of that.
Yeah, oftentimes, the greatest enemy within the church does not come from without, but within, right? I mean, it's not, you can destroy, and that's the thing. What you said there, a wolf in sheep's clothing there, is oftentimes we'll let our guard down with people that, kind of use the same kind of vocabulary as us, or, oh, you're a Christian too, and then, at that point,
it's all about Jesus.
That's right. That's right. So, it's just very easy. It's very easy to even compromise on some of those things, for the sake of keeping the peace.
That's right. Zerubbabel and Ezra could have done that. And I wonder what would have happened had they.
They'd have probably been worshiping all sorts of pagan
false
deities.
I think those guys may have just undermined the work of the temple in an even worse way. Maybe in a more...
Maybe slowed it down
or even just built it in a way maybe that it would fall later or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? But I think they made the right call here, and they saw it for what it was there, and they stood their ground. They paid a little bit of a cost, but in the long run, got their temple built. But
they worked up the opposition to get it stopped. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it did. It stopped for years.
Yep. For me, the verse that I really kind of, or I guess verses I picked out were in chapter 3, verses 11 through 13. So they get the foundation of the temple set, and you would think this would be a good time, a time of celebration, and it appears that some of that was going on, but not everyone was satisfied. And it says right here in verse 11... And they sang responsively, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever toward Israel.
Nope, stop there. You notice that verse? What's different about that verse? He is good, and his steadfast love endures forever.
Well, it's a quote.
It is, but typically you don't have the toward Israel on there if you read the Psalms.
Oh, yeah.
So I wrote down in the margin at the top that God's steadfast love has direction and a destination. And I think it's easy, and again, this is why I say this. because I've often talked about the difference between categories and specifics.
Right.
Like you can love a category and not actually love something within the category. So I could love the church,
But you
not love the people
of the church.
or a particular church.
Just you love the idea.
That's right. But I love what he says right there, that the steadfast love of the Lord, well, endures forever. Right?
Who's against that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sure.
But suddenly when you say it's toward Israel,
Oh, yeah, not everyone's going to be on board with that.
might not be. So if but it's also if you are the part of the people of God, it's a really good thing, because I know that there's a special love, there's a distinction that's being made. So that's just something I thought about. When
That's good. But we got a little bit of a party going on here. It says, once again, they were singing these songs, quoting the Psalms there. And it says, all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. It says in verse 12, but many of the priests and Levites and heads of the fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first house, wept with a loud voice when they saw the foundation of this house being laid, though many shouted aloud for joy. So the people could not distinguish the sound of the joyful shout from the sound of the people's weeping. For the people shouted with a great shout, and the sound was heard from far away. And that's kind of whenever the new people, they're catching notice there.
Yeah.
But that's kind of if you think about that, you couldn't make out the sounds of wailing from the shouts of joy. And what a surreal scene that was.
Yeah, what a mix.
Yeah. So, for me, I put after the foundations of the temple had been laid, many of the younger generation rejoiced and sang psalms, while the older generation wept because the new temple wasn't as glorious as the former. And just for my application, I said it's an easy thing for the Christian to look back on better times. There's nothing wrong with that, but we never need to stay there, just kind of weeping, lamenting. Regardless of the situation, we must always seek not only to be content, but joyful in the situation God places us in. So, I think for these guys, and it's understandable, maybe you were taken very, very young, into captivity into Babylon, and the last memory you had of the temple was this beautiful,
you saw
glorious,
it when it was at its
whenever
pinnacle.
God was the architect.
Yeah.
And just whenever these foundations are laid, you clearly see that's not what it's going to be this time. And, maybe this is just momentary, I don't think.
Well, I think there is a role to play here when you could remember back and say, maybe a warning, maybe a way of God convicting. Look how far we've fallen.
Sure.
We got to do the best with what we've got. And
Right.
We've got to go forward.
Yep.
But gosh, we've fallen a long ways. We don't need to stay there, though.
Yeah.
You don't need to kind of bathe in that misery. But
Right. What do you do here? So if you're supposed to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice, who needs to give up here?
Well, I think the people weeping at some point have to give up and say it is what it is, and we've got to go
God has
on.
allowed us to come back out of captivity.
See the good and what's going on, and try to work for a better Israel in their case. And maybe one day we'll rebuild this thing to the place it was.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
But you can understand this. It may, you probably as a Tennessee football fan, you can understand this, right?
You had
Like
to take it there.
You win 7 games this year, and you're rejoicing. You get to a good bowl game this year.
8 games with the bowl win.
Maybe you make it to the championship, SEC championship, but you lose. And everybody's, wow, we just did great this year.
Right, but then
you're like 1998.
Right. How far are we fallen? Is that what you wanted there? That's all right. Your temple's about to be burned down, brother. All right. It's about to be razed to the ground. That dynasty is coming to an end.
Yeah, maybe so.
Oh, yeah. All right, brothers and sisters. Thank you guys for tuning in today. We got a little bit more Ezra for you tomorrow, so it's our hopes that you guys are enjoying this as much as we are. And that being said, be tuning in tomorrow. We'll be in Ezra 5 through 6, and we will see you guys then.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Bible with the Brandons. Be sure to like our page on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search for Bethel Baptist RC. You can also get updates at our website at www.bethelnow.net. Thanks again for listening.